Eric is one of us. I was born right here in Dallas County. Now, like a lot of people in the 70s and 80s, I kind of moved around everywhere. I've lived in every corner of the country, but when my parents divorced when I was 12, I came back here, graduated just down the road at Richardson High School, and was blessed to get a scholarship to go to Baylor University. Otherwise, I would have been working at night and going to Richland, which would have been cool. But I was blessed to go to Baylor. After Baylor, I joined the Navy because that's what I had always wanted to do since I was little. I wanted to fly jets, and decided to go into the Navy and was in Operation Desert Shield. My wife and I, the first 3 years we were married, we went to 3 sets of funerals. It's because they don't talk about in the recruiting office how dangerous it is to fly jets in the Navy. And it's one of those things that the sacrifices that my friends made, the sacrifices that my wife and I made, the first 3 years we were married, I was gone either at sea or at war games for over half the time. But those are sacrifices that we gladly made. I loved doing it, but we wanted to raise kids. We wanted to have a family, so we decided to come back home. We bought a house about 3 miles from north of my mom's house, where I grew up, about 3 miles west of her parents' house, so that we could be close to our parents, so that our kids could be close to their grandparents. I got a law degree, and I've been practicing law for the last 13 years. So when people ask you about Eric, you can say, look, Eric's one of us. He grew up here. Eric's one of us. He knows this area. Eric's served as a veteran, and he wants to go to Washington to serve you. People ask me why I wanted to run for Congress. The reason I wanted to run for Congress is because Washington is broken and it needs to be fixed, and somebody's got to fix it. And let me tell you, part of the problem with Washington is Pete Sessions. I'm going to tell you about him in a little bit, but I want to finish so that you can know who I am. And let me tell you, a lot of people in this district are very uncomfortable with a Democrat. So you need to know when they ask you, who is this Eric guy? You need to know, first of all, I'm a family man. I've been married for 19 years. The reason I was late today, and thanks for rearranging your schedule, my youngest daughter is turning 7 this weekend. I just came from the gymnastics place up the road, ASI Gymnastics, because we had her 7th birthday. And I wasn't going to miss a minute of that. I've coached the Little League teams for each one of my 4 kids. Not every one of their teams, but a good number of them. It's funny, my office at work, it's just got pictures of Coach Eric and the teams all over the place, and Coach Eric and his daughters and son all over the place, because that's important to me. I've taught the same Sunday school class for over a decade. That lets you know where my values are, and it's important because they're values that give me a foundation to serve. It's not that they give me a foundation to tell you what's right or wrong. It's that it gives me a foundation to know that I can stretch outside myself and serve others. And that's the values that my mom gave me. That's the values that my grandmother gave me. I've been a community activist and a community volunteer. I'm currently the vice president of my homeowners association after not being on the board for several years. Before that, I was on the board for several years and ultimately served as the president. I was twice appointed to the Citizens Review Committee in Austin that overlooks charter school applications. Before the Board of Education can review those and grant a new charter, a citizens panel has to score them so that only legitimate applications get the potential for a charter. And I did that. I was appointed to that committee for 2 years. So I've served the community here in Texas. I've served in uniform, and I'm ready to serve you now in Washington. Well, what's the kind of change that I think we need? I'm a veteran, and I'm standing for common sense change. If you want to know about the problems in Washington, you just have to look to Pete Sessions, the person, the incumbent that I'm running against. Let me tell you a few things about where Pete stands and where I stand, because it lets you know why Washington needs to be changed. You know, right now, Pete is sending out paperwork at government expense that talks about energy independence. And he's saying drill here, drill now, and he's saying wind power and solar power and nuclear power and all these kind of things. The thing about it that's quite amazing is that until this election cycle, Pete had scored a 0 on his energy independence score. Time after time after time, Pete voted against wind energy. But trust me, he's going to be running a TV commercial with his $1 million in the bank talking about wind energy. And I bet you he's going to be standing in front of a windmill when he's voted against it 4 times, because he talks whatever the talk is that week, and he goes to Washington and he walks the Washington walk, not the Dallas talk. Now, one of the things that he does is he says, drill here, drill now. But when you actually come up with a plan that's worked before, the plan's called use it or lose it. It's a plan that the Democratic Party came up with for coal mine leases. All these coal mine companies bought leased this federal land to put up coal mine, but none of them are putting up coal mines. So what happened? We said use it or lose it. You've got a couple of years to submit the plans to get that coal out of that land, or you got to get the land back. What happened? More people got coal. They said, all right, if you're going to take our lease away from you, we're going to go ahead and use it. Right now, 99% of the oil leases that the federal government's given out in Nevada are not being drilled on. 77% of the oil leases in Montana not being drilled on. 88% of the oil leases in Utah not being drilled on. Unlike this offshore drilling that's going to take over a decade before we get the oil out, these are leases that if we start drilling now, we can get oil now. Pete doesn't like that. He wants us to drill offshore, but he doesn't want to force an oil company to actually work any where it's easy to drill. I say if you've got a federal lease, you lose it, you use it, or you lose it. All right, what else does Pete do? He says he's for veterans, and who's going to stand up and say they're against veterans? Right? Nobody's going to do that, but he votes against veterans time after time after time. He stands up here in Dallas and he says he's for veterans, but he goes to Washington and he votes against the GI Bill. He stands here in Dallas and he says he's for veterans, but then he goes up to Washington and he votes against the money needed so that our soldiers and sailors who've lost a limb can have the best prosthetic devices. I mean, how can you vote against prosthetic devices for our wounded sailors and soldiers? $54 million. It was called the Mellon Amendment. It was going to be enough to make sure all of our soldiers and sailors got the best prosthetics. He voted against it. Oh, by the way, it lost by 1 vote. That would be his vote. All right? When everyone in Congress, except for 5 people, voted so that this post office down the street and every other federal building in America could lower their flag to half-staff when a local veteran died, Pete was one of the 5 that voted against that. And you know why he did it? Because he thought it was a Democratic trick. Now, I don't know how 200 Republicans could vote for it and Pete could be one of the 5 that voted against it, why he could think it was a Democratic trick, but that's what he thought. Now, we're going to put up on our website his scores. And one of the things you'll see is it's not me talking. This is votesmart.org. Rates Pete, quote, an extreme right conservative. They've got a little chart, a little diamond chart that tells you where you are. Pete's as far as you can get to the right. Now, he's going to say that I'm as far as you can get to the left liberal, but I'm a Chet Edwards Democrat. I'm a straight down the middle Democrat. I stand up for our troops. I stand up for our people. And there are going to be some liberal ideas that I like, and there are going to be some that I don't like. And there are going to be some conservative ideas that I like, and there are going to be some that I don't like. What matters to me is not whether it was invented by a Democrat or invented by a Republican. It doesn't matter whether you call it liberal or whether you call it conservative. What matters is, will it work, and will it fix the problem? Because that's what I'm about. I'm about fixing problems. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you so much for the hard work you're doing, not only for Senator Obama, but for me. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, but I want to respect your time so that we can move on with this meeting. Thank you very much. I'm Eric Roberson.